Welcome to Discovering You, a podcast that explores the intricacies of personality and how it impacts the way we navigate through life. What will you discover today? Hi, listeners. Hi, Heather.
Hi there.
How are you feeling?
My mood meter says that I'm feeling restless. So red zone, unable to relax due to anxiety or boredom. It's not exactly how I feel because I'm not bored, but it was the closest I could get to how I feel. I feel a little bit angsty, but
angsty wasn't an option. You know what I find interesting about that definition? That's almost opposite because it's saying anxious or bored.
Right? I thought that too.
We talk about this a lot here on the show is the words that we use all the time. When you actually come into the definition, it might not be what you think. So sometimes I go to select a word, kind of like today, and then I do it. And then I'm like, oh, I don't actually know that that's actually the word. So for me, okay, again, I feel like we've been doing this a lot lately. We're in the same zone. I don't know how we're spiritually aligned.
Right.
I also got in the red zone. I got apprehensive. And apprehensive is defined on this as unease and worry about something that might happen. I shared with you earlier, there's a, decision that I have to make, and there's a lot of moving parts and not really sure what causes me a little bit of worry. And so that's probably where I'm at. That's where we're getting our reds from today, right?
So I have a question. Do you do this every day, your mood meter?
I don't, but I should, especially since I tell people they should do it every day. Where I recommend it often when I'm working with teams is like before you're coming into a meeting, before you're dealing with coworkers. So if there's a situation like that, then yes, for sure.
Well, and I have the notification set up. The app notifies me. But the only reason I'm asking is something like this, that's like a big decision. Are you feeling apprehensive every day?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's only really been having to make this decision in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 days. So yes, I would say that has been staying with me. But also we're getting down to the deadline of having to figure this out. And so there's probably an uptick in it because of that. Since we are both in the red today, I think that this is probably a good topic to be doing. Maybe this will help us through it, because today I'm going to be exploring the concept of happiness. And it's funny, I've noticed a pattern with me at this time of year. So this time last year, I looked at love languages because, of course, we were getting close to Valentine's. And then the year before that, at this time, I looked at optimism. So I'm wondering if there's something about the depths of winter that makes me want to look at cheerful topics. But before we explore this further, what do you think I chose for today's disc analogy? Since the Super Bowl is this Sunday, it got me thinking about professional sports. So I present to you disc as sports. High D is football, no surprise. Direct contact, aggressive. High I is F1 car racing. It's glamorous and thrilling. High S is rowing, relying on each other to steadily make progress. And high C is tennis. It's more of an individual focus, not relying on someone else. And it's very proper and rule bound. Back to today's topic. Why am I talking about happiness? I think we could use a positive boost at the moment. I feel like it's a tough time in the world right now. And as I said, the depth of winter. So let's put some happiness and cheer into our lives. We love a quiz and assessment on this podcast, so get ready. I looked at two and I was trying to decide which one to use. I did like the Oxford Happiness Questionnaire, and that's developed by psychologists Argyle and Hills at Oxford. It's kind of long, it's in depth, and you have to do the scoring yourself. And honestly, the main thing is it's not really available online. Since my goal is to share information, and I always want you as the listener to have the opportunity to do it as well, you can find the second assessment, which I'm using, in the show notes. It's quick, it's easy, and you get your score right away. But first, what is happiness? Heather, would you have had a definition of it coming into the show? What would you have described it as?
I typically like to look up definitions, but in...
Very high C of you.
Well, I think it's a lot to do with the mood meter, though. What I perceive something to mean isn't actually what it means sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it. But when I think about it, I think happiness is feeling good about your life, maybe experiencing joy.
Okay.
I don't actually know the answer.
No, but I think that was pretty specific. I think it's hard. I think if you ask most people, they would probably pause. I think you just say the word and you feel it versus being able to explain it, right?
Feeling happy feels in the moment, but happiness feels like bigger commitment.
Mm,
Like, I could be
yes.
happy right now, but I could be restless later or apprehensive
Yeah.
or but then happiness feels like it's encompassing my whole life. That's kind of where I got stuck.
Okay. I think that is a very astute distinction. I really, why is that
No one
funny?
ever calls me astute. I guess you weren't calling me astute, but
Well, the distinction that you made was astute, thereby you are astute.
I like it.
That really does make me think about it. Interesting that you touched on that in terms of current moment versus maybe more general. I honestly don't know now how I would have defined it in the past because I did the EQ certification about 7 years ago. And I think because of that, I'm tied into the definition that we learn when we're doing that. Happiness is definitely in the present moment. So it's basically looking at how cheerful is somebody feeling currently. And the EQ assessment will differentiate happiness from optimism, and that happiness is the present time, whereas optimism is future focused. You can see that, right? Like to your point, I think this ties into your point. Well, oh, something's making me happy right now. But if you are worried about the future, like paying your bills or somebody's health or something, then your outlook is maybe not so much. Or if you're having a tough time now, but you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going on vacation in a month, or I'm got that wedding to go to, or something like that, then maybe your view would be optimistic.
Well, and sometimes I'm sad, so then I have a piece of cake, and the cake makes me happy, but then I'm sad again when it's over.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. I love it. I absolutely love that. Well, remember, I think my favorite sound bite from last year was the comment you were making about,
Eat the cake, and I don't actually even really like cake, but I use it as a I do like sweets.
well, I think wine was in that example too. Maybe that was a little more on the nose.
Yes, 100%.
Because of its subjective nature, happiness is really difficult to define. And the more scientific term is called subjective well being. According to psychology, happiness is about more than a positive mood. That's kind of tying into what you were saying, Heather. It's people's evaluations of their lives, and it encompasses both cognitive judgments of satisfaction and effective appraisals of mood and emotions. Breaking it down, there have kind of been three different schools of thoughts in terms of how psychologists have studied happiness. The first one is basically called need and goal satisfaction theories. These theories suggest that happiness comes from striving to achieve appropriate goals and meeting one's fundamental human needs. I feel like that sounds very high D, right? The achieving the goals part of it. The second school of thought had been about genetic and personality predisposition. These theories take the approach that well being is influenced by your genes, and it's associated with personality traits of extroversion and, pardon me, but it says neuroticism. And so I don't know if any of you have done Myers Briggs or you go back to the whole Freud and Jung and all that stuff, but neuroticism was kind of old school thinking in terms of it, just to lay that clear. Anyway, what this theory is implying is that well being doesn't change too much over time and it is kind of very predisposed. I don't know. I feel like this one sounds like high C, right? It's talking about traits and it's fixed and all of that kind of stuff. And then finally, the third school of thought, which is kind of bringing us more up into current time, is process activity theories. These theories contend that well being may be improved by participating in activities that are engaging and require effort. This is looking at it is possible to increase one's happiness. And I think this one sounds kind of like I and S. This disc product placement is brought to you by Victoria, whose mission in life is to relate everything to disc theory. I can't help myself. Okay. More recently, the science of happiness has seen a shift towards studying the beliefs of positive psychology, which is described as a psychology of potential and what could be as compared to what is. Positive psychology aims to understand and cultivate the factors that put individuals, communities, and societies in a position where they're able to flourish. And to dive deeper, what does it mean to flourish? In a nutshell, it's a state of optimal well-being. Martin Seligman, you might remember me mentioning him. I referenced his work on episode 14, Optimism, delineates well-being through the model he designed, and the acronym is PERMA. P is positive emotion, E is engagement, R is relationships, M is meaning, and A is accomplishments. And the assessment that I'm using for this episode is based on Seligman's PERMA model. The full assessment has 24 questions like DISC, but I've pulled out 5 to give you a flavor of what to expect. Here they are. Question number 1. In general, to what extent do you lead a purposeful and meaning life? Now, when you're doing this online, you'll see that your answer is based on an 11-point scale. So you either are choosing something that starts at not at all, and the higher level is completely. Either you would say, I'm not at all leading a purposeful, meaningful life, or I completely am leading a purposeful, meaningful life. Okay. Number 2, in general, how often do you feel angry? Number 3, to what extent do you receive help and support from others when you need it? Number 4, how often do you become absorbed in what you are doing? And number 5, how much of the time do you feel you are making progress towards accomplishing your goals? That gives you an idea of what the questionnaire is like. And in terms of scoring, 6.82 is considered to be an average score. Heather, you and I can chat about how we scored in a little bit, but first, let's look at the PERMA model so you can understand what we're talking about. P being for positive emotion. This can include hope, amusement, pride, gratitude. Positive emotions are an indication of flourishing, and they can be cultivated to enhance well-being. When we can explore and savor and integrate these emotions into our daily lives, they can help undo harmful effects of negative emotions and they can boost resilience. There are always suggestions along with these. So, some of the suggested ways to build positive emotion are spend time with people you care about, do hobbies and creative activities that you enjoy, listen to uplifting or inspirational music. Funnily enough, I would say one of my go to songs for this actually is called Happy. That's always uplifting for me. And then gratitude. Reflect on things you are grateful for and what's going well in your life. I try to do this every night. I try to come up with 3 things. I won't lie. Sometimes this is really challenging. If you're having a bad day and you're upset or you're worried, it's tough. But I think just shifting your focus to say, well, guess what? This is going right. Or at least I have this in my life. It sort of helps you with that positive mindset. Okay, next is E for engagement. And Seligman describes this as getting into a flow state. It includes the absence of self-consciousness and complete absorption in an activity. It's living in the present moment and focusing entirely on the task at hand. He says this concept occurs when the perfect combination of challenge and skill is found. I thought that was really illuminating. This could be someone who gets immersed in yoga or writing or whatever the special thing is for you. And people are more likely to experience flow when they use their top strengths. I think this is so valuable to recognize because this concept plays a big role in the work that I do. When I'm helping someone to hire for a role, it's really crucial to ensure the person who fills it will be in a position that aligns with their strengths. When we have the opportunity to tap into our strong skill sets, we will show up with passion and determination. When we don't, we're always going to be swimming against the current, and that won't succeed long-term for the employer or the employee. Doing a DISC and EQ profile is really, really helpful in bringing this alignment to light. This concept of engagement is more powerful than simply being happy, but happiness is a byproduct of it. And so some ways to increase engagement are participate in activities that you really love and where you lose track of time doing them. Heather, do you have any that you can identify?
Yeah, I think most of mine are spending time with the horses
Mm-hmm.
and the dog. The barn is where I go to forget about everything.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who have horses in their life, that's their happy place and their place to unwind. And if you're listening, shout out Diane, it's you.
It's one of those places where you have to be present.
Mm,
It's definitely with the horses.
yeah, I guess that for you or for babies.
Fur babies, yeah.
Speaking of my fur baby, just made an entrance here.
Hi, Winston.
Other than my fur babies. For me, it's probably, I would say, creative endeavors. So, like writing, working on new content, even for this podcast, when I get a new idea or I'm reading a new theory, I'm like fascinated. I'm reading and I kind of lose track of time. Even deep conversations with somebody. Another method for doing this would be practice living in the moment, even during daily tasks that may seem mundane. Spend time in nature, observing sights and sounds around you, and identify and learn your strengths. Hello, disc assessment, and do things you excel at. Okay, so next up is the P for positive relationships. And you'll notice the emphasis is on positive. This relates to feeling supported, loved, and valued by others. Since we are social creatures, this element is vital. And social connections become particularly important as we age because it's been found to contribute to preventing cognitive decline. So that is huge. And some ways that are suggested to build new relationships are joining a class or group that has a shared interest with you, asking questions of people that you don't know that well to find out more about them. Let's put a pin in this. Create friendships with people who are currently acquaintances and get in touch with people you haven't spoken to or connected with in a while. I don't know, Heather, if I'm projecting. I'm looking at your facial expression. So maybe I'm projecting, but I'm going to pull out the pin. The other recommendations I can get on board with easier. I do feel like this set might be a little more difficult for introverts and ambiverts out there. For more on this, you can check out the episode I did on reframing introversion, episode 4. I don't know. For me, I think the distinction here is to build upon existing relationships, enhancing the substance of them, not just being like, oh, I'm going to go out and make friends. Because I don't know about you, Heather. Did that seem a little bit forced to you reading that? Being like, yeah, I'm not going to just go do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same. And so I'm like, okay, I have to look at it and be realistic. I can see that working for some people, but not all people. And what I would say is if you are joining a new group, ensure that it's one that you're going to be able to have meaningful conversations rather than just like idle chit chat. So, for instance, if you love to read and have deep conversations, maybe joining a book club where you will share a love of reading and have those insightful conversations. Okay, for the M, it's meaning. And an intrinsic human quality is the search for meaning and the need to have a sense of value and worth. Having a purpose in life really helps us to focus on what's important, especially during times of challenge and adversity. The sense of purpose varies amongst people. It could be satisfied through a career, volunteer work, a hobby, religion. It's guided by personal values, and studies have shown that people who identify as having a purpose have fewer health problems and report greater life satisfaction. Some suggestions to build meaning are getting involved in a cause or organization that matters to you, trying new and creative activities that you connect with, consider how your existing passions maybe could help others, and of course, spending quality time with people you care about. Finally, we have accomplishments. In this PERMA model, it's also known as achievement, mastery, or competence. It includes the concepts of perseverance and passion to achieve goals. This next part is a key point, though. Flourishing and well-being come when striving towards things with an internal motivation. Achieving intrinsic goals like growth and connection increases well-being much more than external goals like money or status. And I think most of us realize that at this point, but we still we still seem to chase them. Some ways to attain this are setting goals that are SMART, and SMART being an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Reflect on past successes and look for creative ways to celebrate your achievements. Heather, I think we're good at that last one, don't you?
I do.
We like to celebrate the anniversary of this podcast. I think we're getting an A+ on that.
It's coming up.
It is coming up. Back to the scores. That's sort of the explanation of what this assessment and happiness is about. So again, I encourage you to give it a try for yourselves. And so as we do, Heather and I will often share. I'm going to give you a reminder. The average score here is 6.8. Presumably anything that is then above that indicates that you are experiencing happiness. Presumably the higher up you would get to, let's say 10, you'd be a crazy happy person. I got 7.6, which seems about right to me. And I'll say why in a minute. What about you, Heather?
I got 7.4375.
Okay, I guess I just rounded up.
I like to follow the rules.
Yes, you do. How did that feel? Did that feel about accurate for you?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I get caught up in the minutia of like what's average. And so,
Yep.
but I expected to be on the higher scale for sure. Like I feel happiness. I feel like my life is
Okay.
full of lots of happiness.
I know. When you say that, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I guess that it's not super high, like 7.6. And I guess if you're looking at it, it's like barely a B plus. But I also think,
But it's also like above average, which is something
yes.
that like I'm winning.
This comes back to my feelings on how different behavioral styles, personality styles answer questions. And this has come up before a lot about on the EQ assessment, especially. So I think that people who are high in C, like we both are, more likely when answering questions, the approach is cautious conservative, like the C alliteration there for C. We answer in that fashion. Like we're not necessarily answering in extremes. I know I'm not. And I also agree, I can get tripped up by the minutia. It's like, well, you know, if there's like a scale, I very, very rarely am going to hit the very highest number because for me, that seems like you would just have to be surpassing everything. You just have to be knocking it out of the park to give it the highest number. However, I know that people who are, let's say, high in I, if they're answering those type of a Likert scale, they are more comfortable answering with those extremes. Hopefully, I can articulate this well. I was thinking about this. So, is someone who is experiencing the same reality as me right now, but they're high in I, would they answer this with higher numbers, even though we have the same reality? I'm sorry, I'm getting very philosophical. This is like philosophy 101 here. Likely they would, right? But then if they answer it higher, does that then speak to a more positive attitude? And therefore, they are experiencing more happiness, right?
Well, and I was thinking about that in the opposite direction where I have people or friends that are say like, I don't celebrate the highs, but I also don't celebrate the lows. Like I don't spend too much time in the high areas when things go
Yeah,
great, but I also don't spend too much time if things go badly. So they kind of navigate that middle ground and just keep moving.
right.
Where somebody who really does spend time there when they are happy, would they answer differently, right?
Right. I know. See, we're very deep in the philosophy today. And honestly, I feel like the temptation to go down a rabbit hole, but I will not do that. Listeners, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you have a chance, maybe do the assessment for yourself and have a look at some of the strategies. And I really hope that it brought some happiness to you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye. Introduction to DISC. A succinct, lively talk which outlines the foundations of DISC theory and how to infuse it into work and daily life. Great as a standalone session or an introductory step in the team building office culture process. If you are interested in connecting with Victoria for team building, strategic onboarding, coaching, or a speaking engagement, you can contact her at discoverwhatworks@gmail.com.
This show is a Twisted Spur media production produced by our very own Heather McPherson. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.